More than 50 million people are displaced around the world because of conflict, poverty, persecution and climate change.
Mais c'est parce que ça va pas qu'on sort pour chercher pour la famille.
3 of the biggest gateways for migrants and refugees into Europe are through the Western, Central and Eastern Mediterranean.
To tackle the unprecedented numbers of people risking their lives to enter its borders, Europe is spending hundreds of millions of euros to fortify its frontiers.
We don't know how many people are buried here. There are no names, no nothing. It's like these people never even existed.
Toujours est-il qu'on peut sortir 1000, peut-être même 50 touches la barrière, 2 entre seulement.
Je suis sorti du pays pour une vie meilleure, pour une nouvelle vie, pour une liberté.
One of the biggest entryways into Europe for migrants and refugees is into Spain from Morocco. Most migrants attempt to cross into the small Spanish enclaves of Ceuta and Melilla. These 2 remnants of Spain's colonial empire effectively make Spain the only European country with land borders with Africa. The migrants and refugees storm the border fence in Melilla in their thousands to overwhelm the border guards. Most won't make it and will be beaten back by border guards.
But
the few who do, once in Melilla, will have the possibility to be transferred to mainland Europe.
So we're in Melilla. Behind me is the border, and all I had to do to go from Morocco into what is technically Spain was to stroll past the border guards, but for migrants, it's so much more dangerous.
Melilla may look like a tourist town, but it's primarily a strategic military and trading port. We had arranged to meet with the head of the Guardia Civil's border unit in Melilla. For fear of his own safety, he asked for his face not to be shown.
Mi compañía, que es la que lleva toda la cuestión de la valla, más luego los apoyos que vienen puntualmente pues en verano, cuando hay más gente que posiblemente pueda saltar, pues tenemos la colaboración del GRS que viene a ayudarnos. Y una de las luchas que tenemos aquí es precisamente con la inmigración, entonces no se puede saber. Aquí hay, digamos que 3 formas para entrar en Melilla. Una, los que más dinero tienen, que utilizan el doble fondo para pasar en los coches. Luego hay otra forma que digamos que esos son los segundos, que también cuesta un dinero, pero no tanto. Y luego los terceros, pues saltando la valla.
The Guardia Civil showed us their footage of how people hide inside vehicles. It's more expensive than jumping the fence, but can be fatal, as the cars can queue for hours in the heat.
Que lo que hacen cuando ven algún coche sospechoso, bajan a la gente, paran el motor y le ponen como 2 chupones que van conectados a un ordenador que va detectando si hay latidos de corazón.
It's basically like a doctor's stethoscope. It'll detect heartbeats in the car if somebody's hidden there.
Negativo. Entonces, si sale positivo, pues lógicamente, y hay alguien metido dentro, tenemos que acelerar la situación porque habrá algún subsahariano que lo esté pasando mal.
What's the most common way for migrants to enter illegally into Melilla?
Vamos a ver, yo calculo que un 75 o un 80% salto de valla, 12 kilómetros y medio. Alrededor del 2000, pues, y anteriormente, pues era una valla normal.
Melilla now has 3 fences that cost around 33 million euros. They're up to 6 meters high and equipped with anti-climb grids, razor wire, and cameras and sensors to detect any movement before people reach the fence.
42 cámaras por toda la valla y 3 térmicas que controlan pues, todo lo que puede haber. Ni un centímetro de perímetro sin cubrir por cámara.
We crossed back into Morocco and headed into the forest of Mount Gurugu, which overlooks the Spanish enclave of Melilla. This is where hundreds of migrants set up camp in preparation for jumping the fence. Many had already tried but failed several times. A young boy led us to their forest hideout.
En fait, t'as quel âge?
16.
16 ans? Et comment ça se fait que t'es ici dans le mont Gurugu?
Je suis venu ici parce que les parents n'avaient pas assez de moyens. Juste mon rêve de rentrer en Europe et devenir un grand footballeur un jour.
The migrant camp was organized into communities according to nationality. Most were from Cameroon, Mali, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, and Guinea.
Tu vois ce bunker-là. Voilà, donc c'est les militaires marocains qui viennent nous déranger à 3h du matin, à 2h du matin. Ils nous réveillent de nos sommeils.
That day, there were only a few hundred people in the forest, since many had been chased away by the Moroccan police during one of their frequent raids. We were shown around the Ivorian camp by a guy called Ashavi.
Bon, il y en a eu assez de blessés qui sont partis. Même lui-même, tous ses dents même ont été arrachées par, la police marocaine.
Donc la police, elle vient ici.
Elle met du feu sur les bunkers, elle brûle et quand elle vient, on se disperse. Chacun se cherche. Souvent, si tu n'as pas pris la barrière, que tu tombes à la barrière, tu n'as rien. Mais le militaire marocain, il vient, il prend le bois, il te frappe, il te frappe. Et tu ne vas plus revenir ici? Non, je ne vais plus revenir, mais il te frappe le pied, mais il prend le pied, il tasse.
The Moroccan police tend to target their hands and feet so that they can no longer climb the fence.
Et c'est quoi en fait l'intérêt des Marocains de ne pas vous laisser entrer en Europe?
Ah mais là on ne sait pas, on ne sait pas pourquoi. On ne sait pas c'est quel contrat qui est entre le Maroc, comment on appelle là, et l'Espagne. Tu vois, c'est pas pour là, de là c'est Melilla qui est là.
So this is the last stepping stone to Europe.
Parce que chacun de nous ici à la forêt, c'est vrai, c'est pas parce qu'on a tout perdu dans la vie, mais c'est parce que ça va pas qu'on sort pour chercher pour la famille.
C'est pas comme si l'Europe est le paradis, hein. L'Europe n'est pas paradis. Le droit de l'homme existe là-bas. Au moins des fois où moi-même j'étais, même et lui il était, et nous sommes entrés.
Tu viens de me dire que vous avez quand même, vous avez passé toutes les barrières et vous êtes été sur le sol espagnol et ils vous
ramènent encore dehors.
If true, this means the Guardia Civil is acting in direct contravention of EU law, which states that once a migrant reaches European soil, they have the right to legal assistance and an interpreter, which makes handing them over to Moroccan forces an illegal pushback.
Pushbacks are simply not allowed. They are not in line with EU or international obligations, so member states should not carry out any pushback.
That evening, we heard sirens. There had been a jump.
Jump is happening right now, and you can see both the Moroccan army and police and the Spanish Guardia Civil drive in that direction. So we're going to see if we can see anything, but you know, it may be it's even the guys that we met in the forest today. Oh, take it down.
We had to be careful with the camera, as the area was full of police and military, and if they caught us filming, we'd be arrested.
Ambulance. Yeah, there's another ambulance now.
More and more ambulances rushed past us. They all stopped at a roundabout. We discreetly drove past to try to see what was going on.
We didn't manage to see much, but there were a lot more ambulances there, military trucks, soldiers on the street, and I could see at least 4 migrants on the ground, badly beaten. One of them was bleeding from the head.
Then the ambulances drove off, and we followed them to the hospital in the Moroccan town of Nador.
Can't go in with our car, so we're gonna try to see if we can walk in.
We couldn't bring our camera, so we had to use a cell phone. injured migrants had been dumped on the ground outside the hospital.
Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
Tout bas côté cassé. Il veut faire le programme.
La l'écoute cassée.
The screams came from inside the surgery rooms. A woman was bleeding from the head and her arm was broken. The man next to her had a bump on his head the size of a fist. There were about a dozen injured people scattered around the hospital, bleeding and with broken limbs, some unconscious. A doctor asked why we had bothered to bring them water.
On est venu, on a vu les gens blessés, on a apporté un peu de biscuits et de lait.
Il ne mérite pas, vraiment. Des casse-pattes. Tu vois, il le fait toujours des fois. À 7h30, ils sont directement vers le grillage.
Once they've received basic treatment, they often get bundled onto buses and driven to cities far from the fence, where they're left to fend for themselves. The guys in the forest told us about another Ivorian community in Tangiers, in a suburb called Bukelef. Many go there to recover after failing to get into Melilla. Bukelef often makes the headlines in Morocco because of the many violent attacks on migrants.
We're going to meet a guy called Carefull. He's one of the people who attempted to swim into the Spanish enclave of Ceuta.
In February 2014, the Guardia Civil fired rubber bullets at Carefull and his friends while they were trying to swim to Spain. At least a dozen died.
Tu as été au Maroc pendant combien d'années?
Maintenant que je suis au Maroc, bon, j'essaie de traverser, mais difficile.
J'ai entendu que tu étais un des gens qui ont essayé de nager à Ceuta en février.
Vous ne pouvez pas pleurer, madame. C'est grave. C'est des choses à ne pas expliquer parce que ça va me faire couler les larmes. Il y a eu beaucoup de pertes de vie humaine, énormes. Beaucoup de personnes qui ont été massacrées par la Goja. Moi-même, j'ai reçu 3 balles blanches, une balle sur l'œil, mais Dieu merci, ça va.
Up to 30 people shared this small flat. It was the same situation all over the area. They had all tried but failed to reach Europe.
L'associée marocaine, elle vous traite comment?
Moi, j'ai travaillé chez une femme marocaine. Elle est aussi ménagère à la maison. On m'appelle esclave. Moi, esclave. Je ne suis pas esclave.
Nous, les femmes, nous sommes humiliées matin, midi et soir. Les policiers marocains rentrent, ils cassent la porte, ils rentrent sur nous. Ils nous voient nus, on nous fait sortir, on jette les bagages. On est confrontés à beaucoup de problèmes. Le racisme, il n'y a pas le travail. Mais qu'est-ce que le Maroc peut nous offrir? Que dalle. Ils n'ont rien à nous offrir. Seulement que la mort.
Tout en cherchant toujours l'Europe. Hein. Parce que dans la tête, on croit que l'Europe, c'est le Dorado. Il faut y rentrer. Voilà pourquoi on accepte tout.
We'd heard the stories of illegal pushbacks and we'd seen the injuries. We had also learned that Morocco had begun building its own fence around Melilla, which was confusing as Morocco wants this piece of land back. So to find out more, we returned to Melilla to speak again with the Guardia Civil.
Concertina, que es esto de lo del otro lado que lleva ahí, y la policía marroquí está ahí, es un estado soberano que ellos controlan su frontera.
Have all these efforts managed to get the numbers of migration down?
Y bueno, pues con la colaboración de Marruecos, pues parece que se separa más, pero...
Does Spain start here or is it that border there?
Ni estoy autorizado para saber dónde está España exactamente, ni en esa cuestión preguntarle al delegado del gobierno, que es el que está capacitado para contestar exactamente dónde son.
Where the Spanish border begins is a sensitive issue. However, a Melilla judge has stated that the border starts outside the first fence, meaning that once someone's climbed it, sending him or her back to Morocco constitutes an illegal pushback under EU law. The illegal pushbacks in Melilla have mainly been documented by an activist called José Palazón. He has patrolled the fence for years. In October 2014, he filmed the Guardia Civil beating a 23-year-old Cameroonian unconscious and then sending him back to Morocco through the doors in the fence without processing him or providing medical attention.
España empezó a construirla, a poner cuchillas, hace unos 4 meses y hubo una contestación ciudadana tremenda. Entonces el gobierno español dejó las pretensiones de poner esas cuchillas en la valla, ¿no? Y lo que ha hecho, evidentemente, llegar a un acuerdo con Marruecos para que Marruecos las ponga.
As far as I understand it, Morocco wants this city, Melilla, back. They don't want Spain to have it. So why would they build a border around the area when they want it back?
Habrá que preguntárselo a Marruecos, ¿no? Esa es una de las cosas que no he entendido nunca, ¿no? Y una política de frontera para allá, de pagarle a un sicario criminal de un ejército extranjero.
For the past decade, Morocco has received more than $100 million in financial and technical aid in return for helping Europe tackle migration. Human rights organizations warn that with these types of third-country collaborations, it's hard to safeguard that the fundamental rights of migrants are respected, as is required under the European Convention on Human Rights.
Hasta el mes de marzo, la Guardia Civil actuaba con tanta dureza como el ejército marroquí. Cuando pasa lo de Ceuta, en Ceuta murieron 15 personas la Guardia Civil. En una estación de la Guardia Civil murieron 15 personas. El gobierno prohibió actuar de cierta forma que venían actuando, por ejemplo disparando pelotas de goma entre las vallas, y en fin, quiso controlar un poco la imagen de violencia que estaba transmitiendo la Guardia Civil, ¿no? La devolución por las pequeñas puertas, mira esa valla, tiene una puerta, otra y otra, de salida a Marruecos. Sale una lancha marroquí, ahí intercambian a los inmigrantes. Cualquier funcionario, un guardia civil, tiene la llave de una frontera internacional, abre la puerta y ¡pum!, fuera. Absolutamente ilegal.
We wanted to speak to people who, despite all the obstacles, had made it into Melilla. So we went to the migrant reception centre called SETI. It's built for 400 people, but usually operates at 3 or 4 times its capacity. There had recently been an influx of Syrian refugees, and because the centre was full, many were camping outside, next to a luxurious golf course.
So we're in the SETI, which is where all migrants go once they cross, when they get to Melilla.
We weren't allowed in, but we spoke to some of the residents outside.
1578 Elvis.
C'est un bon nom.
Moi, je suis à 15 000. Ça, sont les 14 000. Nous sommes nombreux.
Vous avez passé combien de temps dans le Gourou?
Plusieurs mois. Moi, j'ai fait plusieurs mois.
Comment ça se fait que tu as resté pendant tellement de temps dans le Gourou?
Parce que c'était pas évident de la barrière. Il y a beaucoup d'obstacles. Il y a c'est une barrière illégale. Il y a plein d'obstacles. Les fils barbelés, les 3 barrières. Si tu n'as pas assez de cran, si tu n'as pas assez de force, tu peux même montrer un peu la première barrière, mais au bout de la deuxième barrière, tu es fatigué, tu n'arrives pas.
Parce qu'en restant dans la forêt, toujours est-il qu'on peut sortir 1000, peut-être même 50 touches la barrière, 2 entre seulement. C'est évident.
Vous avez essayé combien de temps de creuser la barrière?
4.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe aujourd'hui? Parce que on a entendu que demain, il va y avoir un bateau qui va partir en Espagne.
C'est pas là les noms qui sont déjà sortis.
On appelle ça le Salida.
Le nom est sorti, je m'en vais. Inch'Allah, Dieu a béni. Demain à 13h, le bateau passe à Salida.
T'es content?
Je suis, mais comment je suis pas content? Je m'en vais pour une nouvelle vie.
the authorities eventually move people to mainland Spain. That's where the pre-expulsion centres are, or simply when the city is overcrowded to free up space. When that happens, it's cause for celebration, because mainland Europe is where they all want to go.
Pourquoi vous risquez votre vie pour rentrer en Europe?
Si ton père n'était rien, toi tu vas mourir rien. En Afrique c'est comme ça. Il faut que tu sois de la famille royale pour être aussi roi.
Je suis sorti du pays pour une vie meilleure, pour une nouvelle vie, pour une liberté.
One of the Cameroonians seemed to have had an okay life back home. He was a former professional basketball player and a politics graduate. We wanted to know why he had left it all behind.
Je voyais le rêve qu'on effaçait aux yeux des jeunes Camerounais. Il y a beaucoup parmi nous là qui sont des intellos, mais que le Cameroun n'a rien promis. Ne promet rien en fait. Quand je suis passé de la frontière du Cameroun à la frontière du Cameroun à l'autre pays, je me suis dit, bon, mec, t'es vraiment livré à toi-même. Donc là, maintenant, t'as intérêt d'être extrêmement prudent. C'est vraiment difficile. Il faut rentrer dans les forêts, passer comme ça, parfois passer dans l'eau pour déjouer l'armée, les gardes, je sais pas.
Qu'est-ce que tu as vu au Niger?
J'ai vu surtout des enfants qui souffraient, qui n'arrivaient même pas à manger. Vous savez ce que c'est quand tu vois un gosse, une grande personne encore, c'est gérable. Mais tu vois un enfant, celui-là, à peine il a 6 ans. Il se balade avec une assiette autour de son cou, comme un collier, comme une pièce d'identité. Rien qu'à la recherche de la bouffe.
Mais si un de tes amis au Cameroun te demande « c'est bon de faire le voyage, je viens ?»
Non, je lui dirais non, mon frère. Non. Tu sais, ça c'est la chance, parce que il y a des gens, moi j'ai vu des gens qui sont morts au désert. Pourquoi ces frontières? Maintenant, il y a les frontières même dans l'eau, on te dit ici, il y a la frontière dans l'eau, tu vois la mer. On te dit il y a une frontière, tu vois les airs. On te dit qu'il y a les frontières même dans les airs. Mais qu'on ne devrait pas défendre à un humain de passer un chemin à l'autre. Mais bon, c'est comme ça. Je connais des amis, personnellement, les gens avec qui je suis parti du Cameroun, qui partent aujourd'hui. J'attends mon jour. Je ne stresse pas, j'attends. Je laisse la procédure suivre son cours.
Nelly went to say bye to his friends who were leaving for mainland Spain.
Nous sommes surpris de me voir ici. Comment tu me dis au revoir, mon frère? Est-ce que vous m'avez dit m'accompagner? Kerry James a dit, on vient par haut et on rentre en châtain. Nous voici, on vient par haut et on va rentrer par châtain. T'inquiète, cousin, on est ensemble. Ciao, ciao.
Tens of thousands of migrants and refugees make the journey through West Africa to Morocco. In 2014, 7,285 officially made it through to Europe. In December 2014, Spain passed a heavily criticised amendment to its public security bill, effectively legalising pushbacks. This breaches both European and international human rights laws. So far, Spain's many previous allegations of violating EU law have only amounted to verbal reprimands from the European Commission.
جينا تركيا أول شيء أنا كنت مطلوب بسوريا ونطلع مظاهرة ضد النظام. ابني لأنه سوري كل ما بيروح وبيجي بسب السوريين. حكى كلمة قام رشه بالمي السخنة هيك حرق له وشه لابني، فتل وشك. هي أعمال تركيا، يعني بصدق لو يطلع لي بقارب الموت أسافر فيه على أوروبا لما وقفت.
سفينة نجيبها، السفينة نروح نشتريها بشيء يعني شيء قليل بيكون راكب من هدول يعني واحد من هالاشخاص اللي رايحين بنعلمه يعني قبل بيوم يومين فتره بنعلمه على السواقه وبعدين نتركه امرا لله يعني اللي صاير اللي بده يصير الله أعلم.
More than 50 million people are displaced around the world because of conflict, poverty, persecution and climate change.
Mais c'est parce que ça va pas qu'on sort pour chercher pour la famille.
3 of the biggest gateways for migrants and refugees into Europe are through the Western, Central and Eastern Mediterranean. To tackle the unprecedented numbers of people risking their lives to enter its borders, Europe is spending hundreds of millions of euros to fortify its frontiers.
We're afraid of dying in the sea, and no one can know about us.
Most vessels involved in something illegal, they'll react when they say a vessel approaching at high speed. It will deter them.
بعدين أنا مو لحالي يعني 4 5 بنكون مشتركين، كل واحد بياخذ حصته. نحن أهم شيء عندنا هو يعني المصاري، مو ما حدا يفكر برواح الناس.
More than 1 million Syrian refugees have fled across the border to Turkey. And with the advance of the Islamic State, numbers are likely to be much higher. Tens of thousands attempt short but deadly boat journeys from Turkey to Greece, convinced they'd be treated better in Europe.
This is not an option amongst 100 options. This is the only option. And because there are no safe and legal channels that the European Union has offered for these people to come, they need to put themselves into the hands of criminals and smugglers to try to make this journey.
Turkey has become a hub for people trafficking, particularly in Istanbul, in the neighborhood of Aksaray. We visited one of the many Syrian refugee families living there while trying to scrape together enough money to make the trip from Turkey to Europe. Their home was an overpriced damp basement, 3 floors on the ground.
هذا مصباح. هي كل فترة وفترة بتشرع علينا مي هون، مي وسخة. هلا بنتي كل ما اجريها عم يقوسوا. مشكلة كبيرة وانا ما هي عم اعاني منها، ما عم بعرف شو بدي اساوي. يعني لو دولة أوروبية بس ورجيته اياها للدكتور هيك فورا اخذها وعالجها يعني.
How long have you lived here in this basement?
صار لي 2 ونص تقريبا. اجيت على تركيا اول شيء انا كنت مطلوب بسوريا ومؤسسين الطلعات كنا نطالب بالحرية والعدل والمساواة ونطلع مظاهرة ضد النظام.
What is the situation for Syrians here?
فتت على محل هدلاك اليوم عرفوني سوري هجموا علي بده يضربوني. ابني لأنه سوري كل ما بيروح وبيجي بسب السوريين. حكى كلمة قام رشه بالمي السخنة ليك حرق له وشه لابني، فتل وشك. هي أعمال تركيا. يعني بصدق لو يطلع لي بقارب الموت اسافر فيه على اوروبا لما وقفت.
Did you say that the boat was called the death boat?
يعني كثير بصير فيها حوادث وغرق يعني، بس احسن العيشه من هون لان هون ميت انا. لان انا موجود هلا فوق راس هون وما عم اقدر اساوي شيء ولا ما اقدر اقدم شيء.
Those attempting the risky boat journey to Europe depart mainly from Turkey's west coast in the hope of reaching nearby Greek islands. So we travel to Izmir to meet a young Syrian Kurd whose boat had capsized halfway to Greece, and for all we know, he was the only survivor.
بالي بي حشترو بالضبط نفس لفين خطيبي هانين فيدا باز ضحب أوبن بوتيدوبن شرحب كردبون ويازدحب عربون جراقيبون جراقي فيرو شوكات كوكتنابين جرد بيجن اي سريع فيا بتشوك جير ونشتين تنايا توازن سفينه بزوره توازن بي يعني عم دو بين شخص ما بزوره خد توازن كري حتى ما ديسو دغركر السفينه سرعات دوي بيشي سفينه روبي واي بوش دوكات وقلبي سفينه لانه لحظه عم كاتن أوفي يعني بون دبين عم مرن هنقدن ودنجي دنجك فظيع بيونه الشاطئ دير بماس 4 ساعات وماشيين حياجيشتم جي خلك هاي يعني جي مول دار هنا بربي حيانها كاس نزاني سرها فالي متشبونه يعني كاس نزاني كتخبر جنات.
In Izmir, the people traffickers operate in an area called Basmane.
There are a lot of cheap hotels around here where Syrians stay before they attempt to cross. They meet with the smugglers in the small cafes around here. The guys who just passed me were probably carrying life jackets in these plastic bags.
We wanted to speak to a smuggler, but they wouldn't meet with journalists. Then a Syrian refugee offered to do the interview on our behalf.
يعني بنأجر لهم بيت سيارة فرضاً اتصالات بعدين أنا مو لحالي يعني 4 5 بنكون مشتركين كل واحد بياخذ حصته يعني مشان هيك بيكون السعر غالي. سفينة نجيبها السفينة نروح نشتريها بشيء يعني شيء قليل بيكون مهترية يعني رايح نجي بنصلحها هيك يعني شيء انه تمشايد حال بنحط فوق يعني فوق حمولتها فوق طاقتها فرض بنحط 50 60 واحد راكب من هدول يعني واحد من هالاشخاص اللي رايحين بنعلمه يعني قبل بيوم يومين فترة بنعلمه على السواقة. السبب الأساسي للغرق هو الطمع. نحن أهم شيء عندنا هو يعني المصاري مو ما حدا يفكر برواح الناس وبعدين نترك أمرا لله يعني اللي صاير اللي بده يصير الله أعلم.
One of the main destinations for the migrant boats leaving the coast of Turkey around Izmir is the Greek island of Lesbos. The migrants usually depart at night in small, overcrowded boats. I have a much easier journey because I have one of these, a European passport. Guarding the sea border between Turkey and Greece is the Hellenic Coast Guard.
Ali, please, very important. Don't be afraid.
Yes, I know you are please.
Hey, you! Don't make a move, I kill you! Don't make a move! Hands up! Everybody hands up! Everybody hands up!
Okay.
Alongside the Hellenic Coast Guard, Europe's external border agency Frontex has also been active in Greece for years to assist with the monitoring of so-called irregular entries.
So the role of Frontex is mainly to support the national authorities responsible for protecting the borders when they face big migratory pressures. The increase in irregular border crossings has been multiplied by 5 of last year.
We were invited to join one of Frontex boat patrols off the coast of Lesbos. Frontex organises joint operations between EU member states to bolster security at Europe's borders. The boat was sent from Malta with a Maltese Special Forces crew.
Is everyone here part of Frontex?
We have our normal jobs with the Armed Forces of Malta, and just for this deployment they nominate us and we do what we're tasked as part of the Frontex task group. Patrol area. We've reduced our speed and we will start monitoring and patrolling the border.
The sea is completely pitch black. How can you see if there's a boat with migrants?
Using our navigation and radars, we will be able to detect vessels and other targets in the water. We have also a night vision and daytime camera.
We had stopped right at the European border between Turkey and Greece. They didn't have the mandate to enter Turkish waters.
So you can actually see here if there's a boat departing from Turkey directly.
Yes, these two boats that are fishermen.
How do you know they're fishermen boats?
You can see from here their direction and their speed.
Lesbos is a massive island. You're surrounded by a big sea. Is it possible to monitor everything that's going on the coast?
I seem to think so, yes.
If you would notice anything, if you would see migrants trying to cross over to Lesbos, what's the procedure?
We'll arrive at a safe distance, speak to the migrants, make sure they have life jackets, and then they will be taken to safety as required. We're here to assist the Hellenic Coast Guard, patrol the borders, inspect any targets.
So right now the guys are monitoring the Turkish coast and the Greek coast, and if there's a boat they can see it. It's like a dot. So something showed up on the radar, a big boat, and now Ben and the guys are checking out what it is.
Vessels involved in something illegal, they'll react when they say, you know, a vessel approaching at high speed. It will deter them.
It was a false alarm, but the crew still reported it and took photos. Not many migrant boats seemed to be out that night. Sophisticated equipment is used to alert both Greek and Turkish border authorities when a migrant boat is detected departing from Turkey. This collaboration with its neighbours to stop migrants before they reach Europe is one of the EU's routine border practices, because it's illegal to send people back once they cross the European border, what is referred to as pushbacks. Still, many NGOs and migrants have reported systematic illegal pushbacks happening along the Greek-Turkish border, carried out by masked men in unmarked uniforms. Allegations have been made against the Greek border authorities, but as of yet, nobody knows who these men are.
They were tied with a rope and pushed it back to Turkey. It's not only illegal under domestic, international and European Union law, but it's also morally wrong and also inhumane.
To find out more, the next morning we met with a representative of the Hellenic Coast Guard.
Different NGOs interviewed migrants who talk about something called pushbacks happening in these waters. Do you know anything about this?
We don't have this kind of phenomenon. This is an accusation that we hear, but as it is proved from the very, very large number of the people who are apprehended, those phenomena do not exist. Okay.
Why do you think that these stories are being told by many different migrants of different nationalities?
You should ask them. I don't know why those stories are heard.
Are you allowed to tell the boat that actually this is Greek water and you don't have permission to enter?
We call the Turkish authorities to deal with boats who are in Turkish territorial waters.
While we were talking, a Coast Guard boat had disembarked with rescued refugees. They were put into a police van in front of the newly arrived tourists. Because the detention center on the island was overcrowded, the van headed to what used to be a children's holiday camp.
This is a place where migrants and refugees who just arrived to Lesbos by boat can come and rest up before they get processed. It's an open camp and it's run by NGOs and local activists. Apparently the people we saw this morning on the port were 31 Syrians and they've all been taken here. How was the journey from Turkey here?
We were afraid of dying in the sea and no one can know about us. But we have to do this because we want to run away from the war in our country.
Also fleeing war was an Afghan family whose boat had capsized halfway to Greece, and the mother was flung into the rough sea. Many died this way, but by a miracle, 18 hours later, she was washed up alive on the shores of Lesbos.
When you stepped into the boat that night, were you scared?
وقتی که مثلا یک وقتی شد که مثلا پای قد در روی خود چپری شد ما خب تونستیم فقط یک همین خودترک نجات بتونیم وقتی که خاله ما نتونستیم فقط 2 بار 3 بار صدایش شنیدم که یسنا و خلیل گفت بس تمام مامانم چی وقت نجات میده من گفتم فردا باز دست خود پیش میکنه که قول علی خیلی بگو که مامان فردا نجات میداد. من تعجب کردم بر ازی که حالا من چه رقم قضیه قول بدم که فردا.
فقط یک سر با خودت میگفتم خدایا صبح شه که در تاریکی میترسم. جان دادن در تاریکی واقعا سخته.
زمانی که من در شفاخانه دیدم اصلا تعجب کردم. گفتم زنده است یا روحت زنده است. شفاخانه اولین کار کردم رفتم نظم دست شل سعی کردم که باش زنده است یا دور جانش کردم چیزی نشده باشه.
The village of Altogether is exceptional because while other Greek camps operate like prisons, here people can come and go as they wish. But that freedom only lasts for a few days. Then the authorities come to pick them up and process them.
Everything has to do with detention, and that's why we stay here and we keep this place open, because we believe that people can stay in a place open, in a place without fences, where they can move and go out, because they are not detainees. They shouldn't be treated as detainees. They are illegal, let's say, as if they could arrive illegally.
Many of the volunteers at the camp were critical of Europe's migration policies and border practices.
I think the best way is to create a European policy of reception of the people and to have some standards everywhere. And the only thing that is happening is to have more deaths and more traumatized people from this. And also to encourage the smuggling money and the smuggling networks that they get, they profit of the situation. This is the only result of these big operations.
We were introduced to an Afghan boy who had been pushed back by the mysterious masked men during an earlier attempt to reach the island.
اولش که ما رو دیدن چند تا تیراوایی زدن بعد بلند داد زدش که ما میخوایم به شما کمک کنیم ولی وقتی ما رو سوار کردن دیدیم این خبر نیست پولامون و گوشیمون و هر چی قیمتی بود ازمون گرفتن.
Do you know what language they were speaking?
نه فقط ولی وقتی ما رو از قایقمون که داشتن می‌بردن تو کشتی میگم مال بهمون آب و غذا دادن بعد از اون عصرانگوش گرفتن بعد منتقلمون کردن کمپ آیدی ترکیه.
So do you think that they had called the Turkish police to say we're going to drop some people off?
آره 100%.
When you start to see so many disconnected people saying the same thing, you have to start to wonder what's going on. The allegation is given credibility because of the fact that you have so many different and unconnected people who are telling the same story.
Not good here. We have big problems. And the doubles of medicine. We are very sick. We have children who have problem in his heart.
Βρει δηλαδή εγώ πολλούς λαθρομετανάστες πνιγμένους. Μωρά παιδιά, μωρά. 2-3 μηνών γεννημένα. Παγωνιά με -10.
She died from hypothermia. She had personal objects, she had a name, she had documents, she had nothing.
More than 50 million people are displaced around the world because of conflict, poverty, persecution and climate change.
Mais c'est parce que ça va pas qu'on sort pour chercher pour la famille.
3 of the biggest gateways for migrants and refugees into Europe are through the Western, Central and Eastern Mediterranean.
To tackle the unprecedented numbers of people risking their lives to enter its borders, Europe is spending hundreds of millions of euros to fortify its frontiers.
The Greek don't help us. We want to go to another country in Europe.
Επειδή ανεβαίνουν πολλά άτομα μέσα και όταν προσπαθούν να περάσουν από εδώ, γύριζε η βάρκα. Μιλάνε γυναίκες με μωρά παιδιά στην αγκαλιά.
She died from hypothermia. She had personal objects, she had a name, she had documents, she had nothing.
More than 2,000 people were illegally pushed back to Turkey from Greece between 2012 and 2013, according to a report by German NGO Brazil. We traveled to a small Greek village in the Evros region, right next to the Turkish land border. This is where the biggest alleged pushback happened, a mysterious disappearance of a large group of Syrians in November 2013.
So we're in a small village called Pragi. The villagers here have reported seeing 150 Syrian refugees. Some of them were on the town square by the church, and apparently white police vans came, took all the migrants, drove them away, and nobody has seen them since.
Ένα απόγευμα ήταν όντως μαζεμένοι εδώ στα σκαλιά της εκκλησίας, εδώ ακριβώς. Εδώ τα σκαλιά αυτά, απλώς τους βάλαν στα αυτοκίνητα και πήγαν. Και μετά που τους πήγαν και τι κάνουν, δεν πειράζαν οι άνθρωποι αυτοί. Δεν ήταν δηλαδή επικίνδυνοι να σε χτυπήσουν ή να, ξέρω, να μπουν σε σπίτια και να κάνουν ζημιές. Ζητούσαν βοήθεια, ζητούσαν να τους προστατεύσεις. Να λέμε και την αλήθεια. Όταν εδώ πηγαίναν για ψάρεμα και το ένα τ' άλλο, έβρισκαν και νεκρούς. Άρα δεν έλεγε κανείς τίποτα, γιατί να πει. Ποιος είναι ο λόγος.
One of the missing Syrians was allegedly later found in Turkey. According to his witness account, the 150 refugees were beaten, robbed, and then sent back to Turkey. And 13 people were missing after the illegal readmission operation. To find out if the Greek authorities had investigated this disappearance, we went to see the regional police director of Eastern Macedonia and Thrace.
150 Syrian refugees disappeared in a town called Pragi. Do you know what the investigation is at this current moment?
Λοιπόν, δεν θέλω να πω σε λεπτομέρειες. Η υπόθεση, νομίζω, για την υπόθεση έχει διαταχθεί διοικητική έρευνα και δικαστική έρευνα. Κατά συνέπεια, δεν θα πω τίποτα από αυτό, γιατί ακόμα είναι σε εξέλιξη.
You were there in 2010, where suddenly you had a 5-fold increase of migrants coming in, entering your region. How did that affect you as a police officer?
Μιλάμε για 36.000 μέσα σε ένα χρόνο. Δεν ήμασταν τότε έτοιμοι για να δεχτούμε τόσο μεγάλη μεταναστευτική πίεση. Και συνεχίζουμε να βελτιώνουμε τις συνθήκες διαμονής των παράνομων μεταναστών. Έχουμε καθαρισμό από εταιρείες καθαρισμού, από λιμάνσεις. Έχουμε εδώ στην Κομοτηνή, έχουμε γιατρούς, έχουμε προσλάβει γιατρούς. 24ωρες φροντίδα στους κρατουμένους. Διερμηνείς, έχουμε ψυχολόγους, έχουμε κοινωνιολόγους, οι οποίοι προσφέρουν για να υποστηρίξουμε όλους τους κρατουμένους. Βεβαίως, ένας κρατούμενος, όταν τον κρατάς σε ξενοδοχείο 7 αστέρων, είναι κρατούμενος. Βεβαίως και δεν θα του αρέσει ο χώρος.
So we just finished the interview with Mr. Salamagas, the director of the police of this region. He described that the conditions in their detention centres and reception centres were wonderful. This is the absolute opposite of what every single NGO who has had access to these facilities have reported.
We asked to see one of the detention centres for ourselves. One of Salamagas' officers took us to the one in the town of Philakio, but we were not allowed to enter and very limited in what we could film.
The procedure we follow with our crews, it's from this road.
If I go down without a camera, am I allowed to speak to some people down there?
Interviews, it's not allowed.
So apparently there are 300 people in the reception center and about 200 or more in this detention center. I'm screaming Yazidi, so I imagine they're from the Yazidi minority.
Do you speak English?
We're not good here. We have big problems. Doubles of medicine. We are very sick. We have children who have problem in his heart. And don't give us hot water and water clean, not clean. Yes, we come from Schengen because the ISIS kill every family.
Are you applying for asylum?
We don't make asylum because the Greek don't help us. We want to go to another country in Europe.
People don't want to apply for asylum in Greece because if they do, that means that they have to stay in Greece. And they don't want to stay in Greece because it's a country in crisis, it'll be difficult to make a living. We've heard a lot of reports of racist attacks. It must be really confusing because they come from war-torn countries, they had a very difficult journey here, and now they're in this building, they can't leave it. And I'm sure they have no idea what's going to happen next.
Around 6,000 people are currently detained in Greece for up to 18 months, sometimes longer. NGOs have reported subhuman, unsanitary conditions in the centres, with accounts of little or no access to a yard, wet mattresses, and broken toilets leaking excrement to the floors below, and that even minors and asylum seekers are detained, with insufficient access to legal aid.
They're just simply detained in order to be deported back to the country. And again, one has to understand, these people are not criminals. They're being treated as criminals, but they are not. We have heard cases of people trying to actually commit suicide. Detention should only be the last resort, but in Greece it's used systematically, and it's used in a way that we believe it's also a way of actually pushing people to leave the country. It's also a way to tell people you are not welcome here.
Greece has received millions of euros in EU funds to boost border control and build more detention facilities. Substantially less has been allocated to improve conditions for migrants and refugees. Once nicknamed the barn door to Europe, the Greek land border with Turkey is now blocked off by a 7-mile-long fence that cost more than 3 million euros and was built in the midst of Greece's crippling financial crisis. The fence ends where the Greek part of the Eruope River begins, whose brutal undercurrents present a deadly natural obstacle.
We're on the river Eruope, that's Turkey, that's Greece. This is where migrants cross in small rubber boats. And because the river is really deep, the boats are not very safe, and many of them can't swim. Many people have lost their lives here.
We found a local fisherman to take us along the dreaded waterway.
How long have you been a fisherman here in Eruope?
35 χρόνια. Εμείς επειδή είμαστε συνέχεια εδώ, ξέρουμε πιθανή προς πιθανή που πρέπει να περάσουμε. Αλλού το μπαζόνι, αλλού το βαθαίνει. Εκεί που βλέπεις ότι έχει τώρα, ας πούμε, σήμερα 1 μέτρο νερό, το χειμώνα μπορεί εκεί να το κάνει να έχει 10 μέτρα νερό. Και με τη βάρκα που περνάνε αυτά τα φουσκωτά, εγώ έχω δει πολλές φορές αυτά τα μικρά, επειδή ανεβαίνουν πολλά άτομα μέσα και όταν προσπαθούν να περάσουν από εδώ, γυρίζει η βάρκα. Είναι φουσκωτό, πλαστικό, ψεύτικο πράγμα, γυρίζει. Άμα δεν ξέρει κολύμπη, πνίγεται. Έχω βρει δηλαδή εγώ πολλούς λαθρομετανάστες πνιγμένους.
Did you ever have to save anyone?
Πόσες φορές έχω γλιτώσει κόσμο. Μωρά παιδιά, μωρά. 2-3 μηνών γεννημένα, παγωνιά με -10. Μιλάμε γυναίκες με μωρά παιδιά στην αγκαλιά. Άστα.
The bodies found in the river are taken to the regional morgue in Alexandroupolis.
These people who found in the ships were found in the river after 1 month, 2 months, 6 months. As you say, for us the problem is identification, and if we found some personal belongings or anything else, and if someone interesting about these people, and this is the photo from the personal objects, we take DNA from these people, I take DNA from dead people, and they make identification.
The coroner has taken it upon himself to log the DNA of each body that is brought to the morgue. Taking DNA samples and archiving any belongings are the only clues to identifying them.
She died from hypothermia. have baby only one time. We found after 6 months.
How many people have come to your morgue that you haven't been able to identify?
For me, in the last 5 years, it's 500 maybe.
And is this a total number of people that have been found, or have more people been found?
No, from the Greek side, it's this number. But the river Evros, 50% is from Greece, another side from Turkish. If we found someone or body in the Greek side, he come here. If they found in the Turkish side, we have information. We don't know what exactly happened there. We don't know number, we don't know nothing about this. This woman, number 6. She haven't personal objects, she haven't a name, she haven't documents, she have nothing.
So people are now not a name but a number?
Yes, only with number, with nothing else.
So are all of these people buried in the cemetery in Sibiro?
Yes, all the people.
With no means of identifying them, the many hundreds who have lost their lives in the Evros River usually end up in unmarked graves in remote migrant cemeteries.
So you had to drive for an hour up small mountain roads to get here, and the cemetery was absolutely impossible to find. It's completely overgrown, and you couldn't tell that this is a cemetery. There are all these plastic gloves spread around, here, here. They must have been used to carry bodies, so that probably means that they're not buried in coffins. There are no names, no nothing, not even any religious symbols. We don't know how many people are buried here either. Unnamed graves of unnamed people who died trying to get into Europe. And there's no way of knowing why they came, where their families are. It's like these people never even existed.
които извършват 24-часово наблюдение на държавната граница 7 дни в седмицата.
العسكر البلغاري مسكونا رجعونا يعني هيك مرتين ثلاثة رجعونا على الحدود التركية
العراق وبسوريا كمان هيك صار هيك
منك حافظ قرآن ما بتعرف تصلي؟ ايه يلا خال
It's not easy, you see this condition, and have many dreams, many future, but all this thing in rubbish, in dustbin. I'm here, sitting in this condition like a crazy man because of what?
To tackle the unprecedented numbers of people risking their lives to enter its borders, Europe is spending hundreds of millions of euros to fortify its frontiers.
През 2013 година българо-турската граница беше пресечена от приблизително 8500 иммигранти.
بالبداية لو ضليت بسوريا أحسن لي كان. لا في لا كهرباء ولا في لا مي.
It's not easy, you see this condition. They treat us like a criminal.
Bulgaria is Europe's poorest country. In 2013, from just a few hundred entries a year, more than 11,000 migrants and refugees crossed into Bulgaria from Turkey, many fleeing war in Syria and Afghanistan. The unprecedented wave of refugees coincided with the completion of Greece's €3 million anti-migrant fence, sealing off its land border with Turkey, once a major gateway into Europe. Since then, increasing numbers of migrants and refugees have entered through Bulgaria instead. We had arranged to meet with Commissioner Stoyanov of the Bulgarian Border Police to find out more about the situation on the ground.
През 2013 година българо-турската граница беше пресечена от приблизително 8500 иммигранти. Такава миграционна вълна не беше позната в българската история. Това е схема на българо-турската граница.
Is this the area where 8,000 people crossed last year?
Да, това е зоната и това са приблизително 85% от лицата влезе през цялата българо-турска граница. Нейната обща дължина е 274 км. На българо-турската граница 3 гранично контролно-пропускателни пункта.
So Commissioner Stoyanov is going to show us the control room.
Които извършват 24-часово наблюдение на държавната граница 7 дни в седмицата.
Тия са в първата част на интегрираната система, която управлява 6 стационарни големи камери и 48 по-малки камери, 2 работни места, които са за втората част на интегрираната система, която в момента се изгражда и предстои нейното изграждане до Черно море.
How often do you detect people coming in here? Do you see people only when they're just by the fence, or can you catch them before?
Просто действието на самите датчици е по-голямо, отколкото излиза извън обсега на камерата.
Taking a cue from Greece in tackling migration, Bulgaria had just completed its own €3 million razor-wire fence, spanning the 33 kilometers of its border with Turkey, where most migrants and refugees used to cross.
От тук започва и инженерно-техническото заграждение. Преди няколко дни беше официално завършена и влезе в експлоатация. Това ни помогна да намалим състава, който охранява този участък от границата и да ги пренасочим в други уязвими участъци. При задействане на такъв датчик при преминаване на обект, камера извършва заснемане и дава алармен сигнал в локалния координационен център. Съответно, оттам направляват действията на граничните патрули и ги насочват, за да задържат самите иммигранти.
What can you do and can you not do?
Съгласно закона за МВР, ние може да използваме всички разрешени от него средства. Много е трудно да се цитира цял закон, но гранична полиция има правомощия да не допусне лицата да навлязат на наша територия, ако те са все още на съседна. В този случай ние уведомяваме турската страна и те предприемат мерки по задържането на лицата на тяхна територия.
Once migrants and refugees make it into Bulgaria, under EU law, they have to be processed and accommodated. To avoid this, just like in Greece, Bulgaria relies heavily on collaborating with Turkey to stop people before they reach the European border. The fence itself is just a final obstacle. Initially, it contributed to an overall drop in migration, but towards the end of 2014, migrants found new entryways and numbers went up again. The EU has condemned both the Greek and Bulgarian fences, and even Europe's external border agency Frontex seems critical.
Border control is not the solution for irregular migration. This is just a very small piece of the puzzle. Managing migration encompasses many other issues. Development in the countries of origin and in the countries of transit, and the readmission agreements with the countries of origin. Border management alone will not solve the problem of the irregular migration.
Despite the verbal reprimands, Bulgaria's decision to build a fence has not impacted on the EU funds it receives to tackle migration, which since 2007 amounts to €137 million, or on Frontex sending joint operations to the area. We met up with one of their patrols.
You're now patrolling together. You've been doing that for 2 weeks. Is it efficient for you to be able to work together like this?
Do you think it's good?
Yeah, it's perfect. It's for me, it's really perfect.
And do you find it helpful for your work as well?
D'être ici et d'avoir autant de frontières que ça, de pouvoir un petit peu s'acclimater à la nature, peut-être regarder par terre les papiers, les herbes foulées, les empreintes de pas, etc. C'est beaucoup plus un travail de garde-frontière.
How many European borders have you been to with Frontex?
À l'heure actuelle, 2, mais je peux pas vous dire lesquels.
Do a lot of people come through the forest?
In this moment, no. This moment is quiet.
What's their sort of feeling when they get caught?
They are ready about this. They are ready that they will cross illegal. They know that they cross illegal. The problem is with the children and the women. They are afraid. It's no good place for them.
It's not only the Bulgarian border police that was caught off guard by a more than 7-fold increase in migration. The migrant reception centres were completely unprepared. After taking the risk of crossing the border, refugees have faced deplorable conditions in overcrowded camps, often lacking even the most basic facilities. The focus of much criticism has been the refugee camp at Harmanli, close to the border with Turkey. In 2013, many refugees complained that the conditions in the camp were worse than what they left behind in war-torn Syria. In the middle of the winter, they found themselves living in unfinished buildings or rotting tents, without heating or hot water, and a shortage of both food and staff. However, when we arrived, it seemed like conditions at the camp had improved.
So now we're going to meet a guy who lives in this container village within the camp, and he's been here for almost a year now.
Welcome, madam.
Thank you. I'm Milan.
I'm Robert. Mama, no, this is Hey.
Is this what you got for lunch today?
Hey.
What is your experience of having lived a whole year in a refugee camp in Bulgaria?
نوم ما حلوة عذاب مع عذاب عذاب بالبداية لو ضليت بسوريا أحسن لي كنا عايشين بخيمة 8 أشهر لا في لا كهرباء ولا في لا مي نوم ما حلوين هلا أوضاع أحسن من قبل ما كان يهتم بحدا بس هلا عم يهتموا شوي.
What were you hoping to find when you came to Europe?
كنت مفكر إني أشوف أوروبا.
We're going to meet the director of the camp.
Първоначално условията бяха много зле, тъй като това беше изоставено военно поделение. Хората спяха на палатки, дърва. На дърва се затопляха, готвиха се, бяха тежки условията, но благодарение усилията на нашето правителство и на Европейския съюз, нещата се подобриха. Построихме, бих казал, нещо от рода на 4-звезден хотел. Благодарение на финансовата помощ на правителството и на Европейския съюз, на Висшия комитет на бежанците ВКБОН се води, който отпусна доста пари за ремонтиране на района, на сградите, построяване на нови неща. И тази грижа към бежанците те забелязват.
How many people arrive now every day?
Да, идват между 30 и 50 човека всеки ден.
Is that less than what it used to be?
Увеличиха се хората. Сега подготвяме за 300 човека.
This is huge.
Да, очакваме, защото горе-долу сме понапълнили нещата и ние сме готови, тъй като ние оставаме основен център в България и трябва да стигнем около 4000 човека.
The brand new facilities, with a kitchen to feed up to 6,000 people, were surprising, to say the least. Clearly, Bulgaria was preparing to house a large number of migrants. We went to take a look at one of the older buildings.
The conditions in here are very different from the new buildings. Things are broken, everything is dirty.
Many migrants and human rights organizations have reported that Bulgarian border police have pushed people back to Turkey, which is illegal. There are also allegations of excessive violence, both of which Bulgaria denies.
Were you able to enter Bulgaria the first time you tried?
العسكر البلغاري مسكونا رجعونا، يعني هيك مرتين ثلاثة يجينا ومسكونا على الحدود رجعونا على الحدود تركيا إذا بترجعوا بنضربكم مرة جاية. خافوا الأولاد صغار، صاروا الأولاد صغار تبكي وخافوا بس ورجعنا.
Do a lot of your friends have stories like this?
هلا في منهم حاولوا 10 مرات، في منهم 20 مرة وما اجوا كمان. من يومين اجوا حكوا معي، قال مشينا يمكن 19 ساعة داخل الأراضي البلغارية رجعونا.
How come you chose to go to Bulgaria?
قبلي كذا واحد رفقاتي راحوا قالوا لي انه مثلا بلغاريا بتعطي اقامات ومن هنيك بتطلع مثلا فيك تطلع الدولة اللي بدك اياها.
Although most refugees hope to continue to other European countries with more opportunities, they find themselves trapped in Europe's poorest country. This is because of the EU's Dublin regulation that requires migrants to be processed and apply for asylum in the first EU country they enter.
So what are the different functions in this camp?
Да, след това минават медицински прегледи, прави досие, минават интервю, така нареченото дъблинско интервю. Второ интервю, в което ние определяме какъв статут ще им дадем. Дали хуманитарен, дали бежански или отказ от статут. Ако им е за първ път, регистрират се при нас и вече се водят за цял живот при нас. Заповядайте. Да, вижте. Това е машината, да.
Okay.
This is Евродак.
So if anybody applies for asylum here and you have your fingerprints registered here and they go to say Germany or Sweden, they will have to come back here.
Да.
This little box defines which EU state a refugee can reside in. If your fingerprints are taken in Bulgaria, then you can't live in countries like Sweden or Germany, where there are better prospects for migrants, and you'll be deported back to Bulgaria if you try. The only exception to the Dublin rule is if the country you entered doesn't meet the minimum standards for migrant reception, which could be why the EU is investing to improve this Bulgarian camp. Because as of now, Germany, for example, doesn't send people back to Bulgaria because of the bad conditions. With my photo signed by the camp director, we left to check out the rest of the camp.
We're going to meet a Yazidi family who very recently had to flee from Syria because of a crackdown of the fighters of the Islamic State.
كان ساكن بحلب، ولادي صار ضرب بيتي هاد واحد، قلت له صار اخر شيء حطوا يزيدين يمسكوا يذبحوه، لو بيطلع بايدي كنت ما اهجر. ليش حطوا ولادي؟
بقتلوني، لو ما يقتلون يعني مثلا بقتلوهم فورا. منك حافظ قرآن ما بتعرف تصلي؟ ايه يلا خال. أكترية اليزيديين هجروا. إيه طيب وين بدنا نروح؟
Oh my god.
تبع شنغال. شنغال العراق وبسوريا كمان هيك صار.
هيك. So they just showed me a video of how Islamic State fighters just round up the Yazidis during their underwear. They marched them, and then the last picture was just all of these guys we saw walking in a pile, having been executed.
ليش لا يقاتلونا إلنا؟ ليش لا يشيلوا نسواننا؟ ليش لا يعتدوا على شرفنا؟ ليش؟
We see the new building and it's look good, but we don't know to whom this building. And what is the agreement for this building? Is it to live permanently there or just for a temporary?
What happens when you can no longer stay in the camp?
There is no job, no work, no home, no house, no health care. What happens? I will be in the street because no one who will support me, and I cannot support myself because most of my saving is gone so that I will come here to Europe to save my life.
They're only allowed to stay in the camps until their asylum is granted. After that, they're left to fend for themselves. Many live below the poverty line or end up homeless, whether granted refugee status or there illegally.
So we're in a derelict building where migrants stay if they have to leave the nearby camp called Carefull, and apparently they call it the Ritz.
And we sleep in the camp, but they catch us and they tell us that next time they catch us, they have right to keep us in close camp. It's not easy. You see this condition, you see, like a crazy man, but we are not crazy. And have many dreams, many future, but all this thing in rubbish, in dustbin. I'm here, sleeping in this condition like a crazy man because of what I'm coming here illegally. And the person who come here illegally, they treat us like a criminal. And the politics is very, very hard to us. People sleep here. This is my baggage and all my things that I have, yes, and I sleep here. This is my bag, and I usually sleep here 2 persons, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, they sleep here. You suffer here, you go, they bring you back. Why Dublin law? You have to check how the people live here before they say this Dublin law.
What you are starting to see is an impact of Dublin that even the member states are starting to recognize that the system really doesn't work. You see there are differences in the way the same groups are treated in different member states. The policies and the practices, the current policies and practices of the European Union really support this concept of creating a fortress Europe.
In January 2015, Bulgaria announced that an additional 130 kilometers would be added to the fence to barricade almost the entirety of its land border with Turkey. For the thousands of migrants and refugees already in Bulgaria, the Dublin regulation acts as a bureaucratic wall that prevents them from finding a better quality of life elsewhere in Europe.
Il motivo per cui Mare Nostrum è iniziato e Mare Nostrum è un'operazione per salvare vite umane.
What does the end of Mare Nostrum mean? Per noi è inaccettabile che venga ridotto lo sforzo e l'impegno del soccorso e del salvataggio in mare.
Tous les immigrés qui rentrent en Italie actuellement, c'est des gens qui vont souffrir, qui vont mourir. Vous les Français et vous toutes les Europes, on en a mal de vous.
Animale qua, come l'animale, vaffanculo, guarda. Italiano, guarda italiano.
To tackle the unprecedented numbers of people risking their lives to enter its borders, Europe is spending hundreds of millions of euros to fortify its frontiers.
Tous les immigrés qui rentrent en Italie actuellement, c'est des gens qui vont souffrir, ils vont mourir.
Io voglio dire all'Italia sono una possibilità, io prego tutti i giorni il Dio, sono una possibilità. Meglio fare tutta la mia vita al carcere o torno al Marocco.
We called for help. The boat was sinking. There was no life jacket. There was no life jacket.
We're on the island of Lampedusa, at the very south of Italy. This is a migrant boat cemetery. Hundreds of thousands of migrants and refugees have made the perilous journey from Africa to Europe through this part of the Mediterranean. Look at the state of this boat. People smugglers can do pretty much whatever they want. One boat like this, full of people, can be worth up to $1 million.
A record number of more than 170,000 migrants and refugees arrived in Italy in 2014 in unsafe, overcrowded boats. At least 3,000 died on the way. This is by far the biggest and deadliest route into Europe. In response to the tragedies at sea, in 2013, Italy launched the only extensive search and rescue mission in the Mediterranean, called Mare Nostrum.
e Mare Nostrum è un'operazione per salvare vite umane. Il governo decise di reagire, di non stare a guardare, di non voltarsi dall'altra parte.
This operation goes in the international waters off of the Libyan coast, so they literally pick these people up, they put them on a safe military vessel, and then they sail to Italian ports.
In a year, they've saved more than 150,000 people. But politicians in Europe have accused it of creating a pull factor. So now Mare Nostrum is being phased out and replaced with a much smaller border surveillance operation called Triton.
Frontex, l'agenzia Frontex, finanzierà un'operazione chiamata Tritone che costerà poco più di 3 milioni di euro al mese e sarà finanziata con soldi europei. La operazione Mare Nostrum è costata in un anno oltre 100 milioni. Ora costerà 0.
We arrived in Italy as Mare Nostrum was being phased out.
We're at the biggest Italian Navy base in Sicily, and we're going to meet one of the captains from Mare Nostrum. Interestingly, the press guy said that we can't ask the captain any questions about Frontex, Triton, or what he feels about the mission ending. Orders from above. Hi.
Piacere.
I'm Milan.
Sono il tenente di vascello Leonardo Pietro D'Alessandro, il comandante di nave Sirico. Quindi da ottobre del 2013 questa nave ha salvato quasi 8.000 persone. Ho avuto modo di toccare con mano quella che era la reale consistenza dei flussi migratori. La missione più difficile forse è stata questa del peschereccio da 720 persone. Imbarcava acqua e le persone erano tantissime, compresse in piccoli spazi, molti addirittura erano sopra la plancia, in posti dove normalmente non è previsto che personale possa camminare o ci si possa sedere. Quello che facciamo fondamentalmente, una volta che ci siamo accertati con i nostri sistemi ottici che si tratta di persone che necessitano di soccorso, quello che facciamo è mettere in mano subito 2 dei nostri gommoni. I nostri gommoni hanno a bordo personale medico. Questo personale medico verifica la presenza di donne e bambini o persone magari molto anziane che necessitano di essere ricoverate a bordo per prime. Il problema è sicuramente legato al fatto che le imbarcazioni sono strapiene, molto piene, sovraffollate. Ogni movimento, ogni interazione tra i miei piccoli gommoni e queste imbarcazioni può provocare la caduta a mare di persone.
With the Italian Navy's rescue capacity drastically cut down, international merchant vessels happening to be in the area were now tasked to answer migrant boats' distress calls, despite lacking training or the necessary equipment.
Do you think that it's important, if somebody's going to go out and rescue a boat in distress like that, that people know what they're doing?
L'addestramento, la capacità di poter gestire questi piccoli mezzi, la capacità di poter manovrare anche in condizioni difficili è la chiave per portare con successo a termine questo tipo di operazioni.
It's a lot to ask of a merchant vessel.
Sì. Il vantaggio di aver istituito Mare Nostrum è stato sicuramente quello di salvare molte più persone. Se Mare Nostrum non ci fosse stata, sicuramente molte persone si sarebbero comunque messe in mare e sarebbero sicuramente morte nel tentativo di arrivare in Europa.
Mare Nostrum's main mission was to save lives. It had a trained staff of 900 engaged any single day and 32 naval units at its disposal, which cost Italy €9 million a month to run. Frontex Triton, however, is primarily a border control operation, covering a smaller area and running on less than €3 million a month.
So we're about to go on a patrol plane with a Frontex pilot. Because Operation Triton is only a third of the size of Mare Nostrum, air surveillance is a huge part of their mission.
We are the first line of surveillance that there is in this operation. We try to go as far as possible into the limits of the operational area and spot any boats. The aircraft has been specifically fitted for maritime surveillance, meaning we have a surveillance radar, we have a very powerful camera system with an infrared camera as well.
In terms of patrol area, what's the difference for a plane like yours and a Mare Nostrum surveillance plane?
The operational area is just north of the Mare Nostrum area, about 40 miles west of Lampedusa and hundreds of miles north up into Sicily. It's not as far down south as Mare Nostrum.
We're patrolling the Mediterranean, searching for migrant boats. They have cameras, they can zoom down and see every single boat in the surrounding area.
We document the boat as thoroughly as we can. We take all the images, video, pictures, where it is, position and speed, where it's going, perhaps how many people are on board. And then we document this and we send all of this to the mission command that's in Rome.
Is there any activity going on at the moment?
Just before the flight, we learned that there was, I think, 5 separate cases of immigrant boats heading for Lampedusa. They are now well outside of the Frontex operational area, and I believe the Italian Navy is taking care of these boats at the moment.
We didn't spot any migrant boats during the air patrol, so upon landing, we tried to board a Portuguese Frontex ship off the coast of Lampedusa. But the waves were too brutal.
So we tried to get to the big ship today. The sea is just too rough.
Well, the sea has been rough for the past 3-4 days. In fact, the size of the height of the waves is reaching 7 meters now, so it would be very dangerous to get on board of this big vessel, which really makes you realize how dangerous certain rescue operations are, and these people do this on a daily basis. The boats that we witness coming here on the island of Lampedusa are rusty, which are completely unseaworthy. They shouldn't be in the sea in the first place, let alone with 500 people, women and children on board.
Are they wearing life jackets?
Yeah, the smugglers are profit-oriented. They're basically running a zero-risk, high-profit operations. Wearing life jackets for them reduces space available on the boat. So we don't see the migrants wearing life jackets at all.
What would be needed for Frontex to be able to carry out the same kind of search and rescue missions on the scale of Mare Nostrum?
Our current mandate focuses exclusively on border control, so that would require the change of our mandate, and therefore that would be the decision of the European Commission and the European Council, as well as the European Parliament, respectively.
Triton wasn't intended to replace Mare Nostrum, but rather to assist Italy, mainly with border surveillance. The EU considers it Italy's responsibility to rescue people in its waters. So it's unlikely Frontex will get the mandate and budget to carry out the type of operations necessary to save thousands from perishing at sea. The 5 migrant boats we'd heard about during the air patrol had been intercepted, and those aboard were being taken to Sicily. So we headed there as aid workers and police prepared to receive them.
We're in the port of Pozzallo in the south of Sicily, and we're about to witness what could be one of the last extensive search and rescue missions carried out by the Italian Navy. In the horizon is a ship called San Giorgio, which was used extensively during Mare Nostrum, and on board it are 863 rescued migrants and refugees, and they're currently being transferred onto smaller ships to be able to get into the harbour.
Il tempo che arriva il dottore Morabido e così vediamo, perché stiamo aspettando un altro medico.
Va bene, però si parla anche con i nostri.
Ok, vediamo quanti siamo.
People are getting out and being transferred into coaches, and hundreds more are still waiting in the big ship to be transferred.
We were not allowed near the migrants as they were undergoing medical checks and initial screening.
The coaches are here waiting to transport the rescued people. All the seats are covered in plastic bags, and there's huge sanitation, like everyone's wearing masks and hazmat suits.
Then we heard that a foreign merchant ship had rescued 230 migrants and refugees. So we headed to the port of Messina, where it was about to dock.
The boat has arrived. There was one man who's very ill. He was carried out on a stretcher. They're having their photos taken
to start entering them into the system. And they're doing one last medical check and then they're going to be taken to a center.
Sono arrivati dopo più o meno 3 giorni di viaggio in mare. Ci sono moltissimi minori somali non accompagnati. Questa è stata una costante un po' in tutti gli sbarchi. Circa 24.000, di questi 12.200, anzi più di 12.200 sono minori non accompagnati, cioè sono ragazzi tra gli 11 e i 17 anni che sono arrivati da soli in Italia o perché hanno perso i loro accompagnatori durante il viaggio o perché direttamente sono partiti da soli dai loro paesi di provenienza.
What does the end of Mare Nostrum mean?
Non sappiamo quello che succederà. Noi come Save the Children, così come tante altre organizzazioni umanitarie internazionali, abbiamo lanciato un appello al governo italiano e all'Europa affinché non venisse chiusa Mare Nostrum. A fronte di una sofferenza crescente per centinaia di migliaia di persone, per noi è inaccettabile che venga ridotto lo sforzo e l'impegno del soccorso e del salvataggio in mare.
We went to the emergency center where the migrants and refugees were taken. With reception centers often full, many end up staying in these emergency structures for months.
We're going to see if we can speak to some people about their journey.
C'est une situation catastrophique qui nous a poussé de venir. Même il y a des gens qui meurent dans la route. Beaucoup. Il y a des accidents, tout. Il y a là-bas. C'est dur maintenant.
Est-ce que c'était cher de partir sur le bateau?
Oui, c'était cher, oui.
Ça t'a coûté combien?
Bon, c'est 400 000. Hein.
Et qu'est-ce que tu espères de trouver ici?
Ici, du travail, mon travail. Travailler, oui. Et avoir du bien pour rentrer chez moi.
You were on the boat that arrived. How did you make the journey from Libya here to Italy?
Yeah, some people help us, you know, because they were fighting, so no choice to live in Libya.
Did you know how dangerous it is to try to cross with a boat here, to come from Libya to Italy?
Yeah, it's very risky and dangerous. We called for help, but before they came, the things was rough. The boat was sinking.
Did you have life jackets?
No, there was no life jacket. There was no life jacket.
In Libya, migrants and refugees are caught in a lawless hell of civil war, slave labor, and extortion. Many are imprisoned in the numerous detention centers from which Human Rights Watch reports severe overcrowding and excessive torture at the hands of the guards.
NGOs and people say that there are prisons. Have you heard anything about this?
Yeah, I was not, I didn't make any crime. I didn't make nothing. As they just catch me and take me to jail straight. When you are a foreigner in Libya, you have no freedom.
How long were you in the jail?
I spent 3 months in jail.
For no reason at all?
For no reason. I can say no reason.
What is the situation in the jail?
Very rough and tough.
No food to eat. You are suffer.
They beat people like crazy.
Every day they are beating you. They are beating you every day.
Were you in jail also?
Yeah. I'm in jail 7 months.
7 months?
7 months.
They will kidnap you and they will ask you to pay money.
Maybe they ask €500, you know.
So your family have to pay?
Yeah, your family have to pay. So when you don't have, you live in jail.
Because of the situation in Libya, that's why people are coming to Italy.
We drove down to the central station because Cameron and Buba haven't called their families for a couple of months, so they want to let them know that they're okay, and they were given these phone cards at the tent center.
Hello, mate. I'm mate. Alhamdulillah. Pagamenadi. Tananterek. I get a phone. Betali. Mergal le kontan le. Ngalo ne because barakira le al mengal lokal al kana ko da malamira. Ye bara ko la kairol be. man. She said today she will sleep very well, you know, because she's feeling happy. Thank God now. Yeah.
The two boys headed back to the camp, but many of those who arrived on the same boat as them had no intention of staying in Italy. They instantly escaped the emergency center to avoid having their fingerprints taken, as that would register them in Italy and prevent them from applying for asylum elsewhere in Europe. With no money or anywhere to go, many migrants end up living on the streets.
We're behind a central station in Catania, and we've heard that there are a lot of people sleeping in this abandoned building, so we're going to see if we can talk to them.
Donne fraga.
Et ça fait combien de temps que tu habites ici?
Je suis là maintenant, ça fait 2 ans. Je dors ici.
Et la société italienne, elle vous aide?
On nous met en prison, on ne dit rien.
Hier, on a rencontré 2 garçons qui viennent de sortir d'un bateau. Qu'est-ce que tu crois qu'ils peuvent espérer?
Tous les immigrés qui rentrent en Italie actuellement, c'est des gens qui vont souffrir, ils vont mourir. C'est obligatoire. L'Italie ne peut rien faire. Bon, quand je suis venu ici, si ce n'est pas la guerre, je ne vais pas.
Some have been here for a year and a half, some for 2 years, some arrived a month ago. They say the Italian migration centers can't help them, the NGOs can't help them. And since they have no documents and no money, they have nowhere else to go. Est-ce que c'est possible de voir ici dans la maison?
Tu veux rentrer, même filmer ma chambre, la fenêtre. Oui. On dort ici.
Et ça fait combien de temps que tu habites ici?
2 ans.
2 ans.
2 ans, sans travail, sans rien. Ça, c'est ma porte.
He said he used to sleep in here before, but then there was a fire, so now he sleeps in there with the other guys. Ici, c'est la cuisine?
Si, mais maintenant je vais cuisiner. Je vais envoyer mon petit truc lequel je vais cuisiner. C'est ça, on va préparer. Il y a 2 têtes et on mange sur notre vie. Bon, je connais les remorques. À limite, c'est ce que je faisais, dans mon pays, c'est ce que je faisais. Quand on arrivait ici, quelqu'un qui n'a même pas un vélo, comment tu vas demander pour conduire? Hein? Non, on est resté tranquille comme ça, regardez les blancs.
If you're not considered to be an asylum seeker, but instead suspected to have illegally migrated to Italy for financial reasons, you can end up in detention centers and then deported. We headed to Rome to visit a detention center called Ponte Galeria.
We're about to enter the biggest detention center in Italy. We're going to go in with an activist called Gabriella. She's been working for the past 3 years trying to close down these kinds of detention centers.
The detainees at Ponte Galeria have in the past years gone on hunger strikes, rioted, and sewed their lips together in protest against the living conditions and not being told how long they would be incarcerated. In Italy, migrants can be detained for up to 18 months.
We are all in revolta.
Do you know why you're here?
Per documenti, che non ho documenti. Che non puoi tornare in Tunisia, non puoi stare qua.
Have you tried to escape from here?
Sì, io la verità ho provato una volta. Però troppo alta e...
Gabriella, you're talking to lots of people here and you're giving them your number. Is this something you do often? Can you describe what you're doing now?
Yes. Allora, ogni volta che facciamo una visita i migranti chiedono a noi di avere un'assistenza sociale ma anche rispetto ai singoli casi e capire se gli avvocati riusciranno a liberarli o meno.
Why do you devote so much time to this?
Perché per noi questi centri devono essere chiusi, sono una chiara violazione dei diritti umani, le persone sono private della loro libertà personale per un reato amministrativo e non penale.
How come you're here in this detention center?
I sell umbrella for me, for work. This time police catch me and take care. I am come from Bangladesh. There's so much problem in Bangladesh. The political and another leader together killed my brother 2 months before. I first come in from India, there's Pakistan, then Iran, Turkey, Bulgaria, Macedonia, Serbia, then Croatia, Italy. I'm not a terrorist, I'm not a criminal. I want a free life, I want to make job. That's why I want to live there.
Ho trovato il mio letto!
So one of the detainees is telling us that there's a room he wants to show us.
Guarda, merda proprio. Animale qua. Come l'animale, vaffanculo, va. Guarda, merda questo, guarda. Guarda, italiano, guarda italiano. Italiano, guarda.
So you're going to see the women's section now. There's a 23-year-old Moroccan girl here who might be expelled tomorrow. She fled to Italy because her parents married her away twice against her will, and her last husband abused her so badly that she lost her child. She's already had one court hearing, and they concluded that she was going to be expelled. She appealed it, and tomorrow is her last chance. If it doesn't go well, she'll be sent back to Morocco. She's incredibly worried.
Sono a rischio, consolato chiamato a me, conosciuto a me, perché la marocchini, consolato come la metà del mio marito, entra dal marito, perché loro lo sai io sono sposata, torna dal marito, tu sei donna, posso vivere con uno ammazzato bambino? Non posso vivere con lui, non posso. Io voglio dire, l'Italia sono una possibilità, io prego tutti i giorni il Dio, sono una possibilità, meglio fare tutta la mia vita al carcere o torno al Marocco.
Italy struggles to meet human rights standards when handling the humanitarian crisis at its doorstep. On top of that, a massive corruption scandal has been uncovered, involving a suspected mafia group being knowingly awarded government contracts to run migrant aid centres worth millions of euros. But still, the most urgent issue is how to prevent deaths at sea. The president of Italy's Chamber of Deputies, Laura Boldrini, used to work for the UN's refugee agency and is the most vocal politician on the issue.
Why did Mare Nostrum come to an end?
Mare Nostrum è terminata perché di fatto aveva un costo molto elevato, 9 milioni di euro al mese, e questo per il nostro paese è diventato un costo forse troppo alto. Quindi è importante che adesso tutti i paesi si facciano carico del salvataggio delle vite nel Mediterraneo, perché quella è frontiera europea e dunque è giusto che ognuno faccia la propria parte.
Some politicians in Europe accused Mare Nostrum of creating a pull factor.
Molti politici non sanno come si vive quando ci sono i bombardamenti, le persecuzioni, e dunque facilmente dicono queste cose senza capire il senso profondo di questo. Una persona che fugge da una guerra, che fugge da una situazione di violenza generalizzata, sicuramente non si pone la domanda di che tipo di operazione c'è in mare, quindi non credo che sia un pull factor. Nonostante Mare Nostrum, però, almeno 3.000 persone sono morte, e queste sono cifre inquietanti, terribili. Sono cifre che ricordano una guerra, ed è una guerra in cui non possiamo rimanere a guardare. In termini di salvataggio in mare, io mi auguro che veramente l'operazione di Frontex, Triton, abbia le risorse, abbia i mezzi necessari per poter fare altrettanto, perché altrimenti noi rischiamo che ci saranno tanti più morti. E allora chi risponderà poi di tutte quelle morti?
When it comes to the responsibility for rescue missions in the Mediterranean, there appears to be a grey zone, with Italy pointing to Europe and Europe saying it's Italy's duty. In February 2015, at least 300 people died on their way from Libya to Italy, in dinghies sent out by smugglers into a violent storm. According to the UN's refugee agency, in January 2015, 60% more migrants attempted the journey to Italy compared to 2014. The difference now is that Mare Nostrum is gone and Frontex Triton lacks capacity for large-scale rescues. The increasing number of migrants and refugees risking their lives to get to Europe are now completely at the mercy of the deadly sea. More than 27,000 have died trying to get to Europe since 2000. With no rescue missions or safe legal routes, the death toll is bound to get higher.
If the position of the European Union is to allow people to die in the Mediterranean or allow greater numbers to die in the Mediterranean, I mean, that's morally reprehensible, and that is not a European policy that we can be proud of.